we're going to be testing out and sketching a new character design for a key character in the upcoming tournament arc within my series Apple Blacks. 3 volumes out, and we'll just go over the thought process of me putting together this tournament arc, what makes it different, who this character is, and why I made the decisions that I did. In this video, I'm going to use some of this time to maybe go over some future characters and maybe the next arc. I've kind of talked about what the next arc in Apple Black is going to be. It's kind of like a staple of shonen manga at this point. But I'll try to have my own twists and spins to kind of make my execution stand out above the rest, right? With elements of well, first off, it's kind of like a tournament arc, right? But having the elements of, say, sponsorships and even that has kind of been done to a degree, but there are other elements that I want to incorporate. Most of it's been done before, but I have very distinct, unique ideas on how I'm going to execute that I don't think have ever been done in any kind of tournament arc. Maybe things inspired by the Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and The Matrix. Morpheus and Neo are battling, where people are kind of seeing it through a screen. They're not actually battling, they're actually hooked up to something. And so in my series, there's something called Nirvana. Nirvana was served kind of like a Matrix. Without going into too much detail about what that is, people who've read my book have a good idea of what it is. If you don't, get my books. You know, that way it's easy to actually televise the event throughout the whole continent within my world and even have some menacing figures. You could do a lot of cool stuff with that. It's going to be called the Nirvana Games, and that's kind of how it's going to be put together. And then also you're going to have a set amount of participants from all 6 countries in that world, this world that I've built, coming together, and then they'll be put together and then split into 6 houses: red, yellow, blue, green, white, and black. And then there'll be like this thing about the houses and this history about the houses and who they're named after and who gets to go into certain houses. So you get some Harry Potter elements in there as well. The participants will rock color-coded cloaks and uniforms that are in step with what house they're in. So we already know that a cloak is going to be incorporated in this design already. So sometimes when you have a good idea of who the character is and where they are and what the environment is, that can inform what your design is going to look like. At least a version of their outfit, right? You still want to figure out what's underneath the cloak. And then some of the houses are kind of, how do I put it, known to have certain types of people. And so you start to see some characters go into houses that you wouldn't expect, and it's going to be like really cool. Like the way I have it set up, it's going to be fun. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's always fun to kind of discuss. You can see I'm kind of drawing inspiration from all sorts of places. Fun fact, it's not just Harry Potter. Like in my secondary school, we had houses as well, and we had sports, and you represented your house in the sports. I was in the Red House, High Johnson. I almost threw the javelin for my house. It's pretty decent at it. I could be all up in 300, King Leonidas and stuff. Feel me? Houses, I think, are a very British thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. When Nigeria was colonized by them, so makes sense, doesn't it? But Harry Potter just took those elements and added it to his old wizardry world. And while I think of all this stuff, right, it's good to think about the future, but not too much. Still stay grounded to make sure like I finish Apple Black. It's great now. We have assistants helping me out, but I still have to kind of drive that. So a lot of it is still on me to do. And so it's good to stay grounded, but at the same time, it's also good to know what happens in the future. That way you can prepare for it and even foreshadow things in a creative way. And that's what I plan to do. And so some characters we're going to have to see, and it's always cool to be able to put a face to the ideas you have. Now this character, Beugene guy, for those who've been watching my videos for years, in like 2 videos I've shown like sketches of what I have in mind. And so you should be able to recognize it here a little bit. But now I want to have an updated version, something that, just to update the draft. Nothing I do here is going to be final. As usual, it's always only final until I start to put it in the actual books. Beugene here is going to be a little bit of a creepy kid. You can think of him at, well, he's not really like a Mellow from Death Note. I think the only thing they have in common would be maybe really being smart and having a weird past and liking chocolate maybe, but he's closest to the assassin from Cowboy Bebop. I don't know if you guys remember that. So Beugene is not going to be able to talk, or at least he doesn't talk, right? Whether he can talk or can't, I leave that to the books. And he will be somewhat of a ventriloquist, and that's how he communicates, right? And there's some influence with Bullseye from season 3 of Daredevil, like the Netflix Daredevil or whatever they do with that Daredevil. even like a Robbie from Victorious, where you kind of communicate back and forth with his own puppet, where maybe he's not saying anything, but the puppet's kind of like talking for him, which is kind of weird, right? Where you see those shows where the character, maybe one character can't talk, maybe his dog, and the dog will say roof, and the person will be like, you mean this? It'll actually be the opposite here. There's some influence from Waylon Mercy, being that creepy, and maybe that might even play a role with the puppets, and he would have like this curly tattoo on his face, almost like 21 Savage-ish, but I guess scary in a different way. And then some influence from like Bray Wyatt the Fiend, kind of having those puppets as well. So even the puppets would be modeled after certain figures in his life, as well as certain moments in his life, right? So you get that element there. Again, without going into too much detail about his backstory and all of that, you would kind of getting the vibe. There's some Psycho Batman villain in here, maybe even a little bit of Gara in there. But one of the puppets would be modeled after this very therapy, parental type figure, but really they're his therapist who is no longer here. And so his kind of mental state is kind of deteriorated over time. I don't want to do something where, I don't know, both his parents are dead or the puppets are modeled after his parents, because we've seen that before, and I wanted to do something different, unique, and also execute in different ways. And so I think those are elements that I'm drawing from, say, Daredevil, you know what I mean, with Bullseye. In fact, I'll have his parents be pretty normal, and maybe they even want to love him, but they just don't understand him, and they're like afraid of him, kind of thing. You know, kind of like tragic misunderstanding. Now he's a crazy person, but really talented at sorcery. So the puppets are really his wand, and wands in my world are any items that have gone through a certain ritual that can now help their users amplify those spells. So I can see him, right, view the world as this show. Maybe that's how he would kind of come off as a character, but in a very creepy way, where the puppets, again, talking for him, would view the world as a show. People will be kind of like the audience, and he'll kind of tell jokes, which are really incantations, like he's saying spells. And whether the joke is funny or not, you might find yourself laughing to death, that kind of thing. Still working out the kinks. Everything's not ironed out just yet. Still working out the powers, because when you're putting stuff like that together, you want to make sure that you have everything planned out. You don't want to make somebody such a threat and not have a plan for when they lose. Like if they do lose a battle, how do you see them losing the battle, right? Especially where this is somebody that you clearly shouldn't listen to. And then you also want to make sure that the fix is not, oh, just blow your eardrums out so you can't hear the actual joke. I can do something with the sorcery to where, even though it's a puppet, as long as you're looking at him, you can indirectly read the puppet's lips and still get the incantation and still get messed up, right? And maybe he messes with your emotion, messes with your hormones, almost like, and maybe not exactly, but almost like putting you into some kind of hypnosis. I played around with maybe not reading lips, and maybe he's telepathically putting the joke in your head or something like that, but I'd rather just leave that to actual telepathic sorcery, or leave that to the telepaths, and do something different here. And that's why I like the reading lips, because that's, you know, maybe part of the sorcery, so you can't avoid it. So now how do you beat a guy who you can't hear or look at? And so that'll be interesting to tackle. I have some ideas on how I would tackle it, but I'm not going to go over all of that in this video. I also have to think of a way to, you know, have him have a plan for defense, you know, if it ever comes to it. So, you know, planning everything out, having him be smart, having the fights still be interesting, whether they're squash matches or not. Just thinking about all that kind of stuff, and I think it's fun to do. You can see with the design and pulling the pants up, you know, the shoes looking a certain way, the socks, all of that, but still trying to make sure the design actually looks like it fits the world that I've built, right? And doesn't look like a character that could have appeared in a completely different series. And playing around with the hair, I've had some ideas of what I want the hair to look like. The hair, color-wise, maybe, I don't know what the color is going to be just yet. I almost just said like a light orange, but for some reason I'm holding back. So I'll figure that out as well in time. I could do something really out there, like freaking, I don't know, we'll figure it out. But I'm giving it some curls, almost like a question mark, but like the curls are almost like a spiral nod to Junji Ito, Uzumaki type stuff. Not Uzumaki Naruto, I'm talking Junji Ito, Uzumaki. Just being a spiral, it's kind of like a creepy thing, maybe just throwing that in there, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing, guys. Figuring it out as I go on. Obviously not all of it. For the most part, I know exactly what happens in Apple Black, but for little details like this, like exactly how the character's hair is going to look, I don't know it 100%. I just know what kind of character I want. I know what he's going to do. I know what he represents. I know why he's in there. I know what his role is. I know some of his battles. I know how he'll be perceived. All that kind of stuff. I even know why a character like this would want to win it. And, think of him as a character who kind of sees the world as a show and the world to be his audience. The people are his audience. Winning something like this would allow him to tell his jokes to a bigger stage. Like he'd be on the grandest stage of them all. And, that's kind of surface level goal. Why he feels that way are, deeper things that would need to be tackled. And I'll let the books do all of that. I know like the key details. I don't know the tiny details, but it's always fun to kind of figure that out step by step. There are perks to winning and doing well, especially winning. There is a specific thing for winning this biannual event. I even know the history of this event and why it exists. Surface level reason, as well as real reason. And then as well as just doing well overall, getting into fellowships, I'll let the books kind of handle that for the most part. Do all the engagement stuff. Helps a great deal. The Patreon is back up and running. You can check out this other video where I come up with a character design from scratch with my experience. Sweat Manga, and I'm Audi 9000.